John, this is a big deal for me. You may not think it's a big deal, but to sit here with John Carpenter and have you introduce a couple of movies means a lot. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. I love what you do on this channel.
John Carpenter, a horror film legend, writer, director, composer, editor. As you go through life and consider the films that you have made, do you think this is a nice little legacy that I've got?
You know, the movies that I made were roundly criticized by critics.
Yeah.
So I remember that in the back of my head. And I think to myself, I'm kind of a piece of trash, you know? And people don't think of horror directors as seriously. They think we're next to pornographers.
There are a lot of people who think that. That's right.
They think, well, why are you doing these terrible things? We're telling stories that we can all gather around the campfire and listen to, like they did way back when. Like the medicine man of the tribe would come out and talk in the firelight about evil. And he'd tell about evil, where it comes from. And there's two kinds, the evil within and the evil outside. Now, the easier one to tell stories about is the evil outside.
Sure, something coming to get you.
Within is tougher.
Well, you picked a double feature, 2 for 1. Frankenstein, James Whale's 1931 seminal, groundbreaking horror film, and then a remake, and the movie that kicked off Hammer's horror craze, which is The Curse of Frankenstein, made 26 years later, 1957. What do you look for in a horror film? What grabs you?
Well, it's all about the story, and then how various directors deal with the story, and then how the actors respond to the material. Frankenstein and The Curse of Frankenstein are both side by side. They're two visions of a story written by Mary Shelley. The first Frankenstein with Boris Karloff is unbelievable. When you first see the monster, he's standing across the room from the camera. Camera does a shot, cut closer and closer, and ends up on Karloff's face.
You can imagine what kind of reaction that got in theaters in 1931.
In 1931, you know it. It's all about the creator and the creation. Frankenstein's monster is different. He's not like us.
You talk about the monster and outsider, somebody who doesn't feel like they belong, somebody who doesn't belong. I imagine when you're making, we'll go to your best-known film, Halloween, how much of the way James Whale did Frankenstein is informing you as you write and direct Halloween?
Everything about that James Whale did informs me in Halloween. The way the creature moves, his otherness. Oh, hell yeah. I'm a big James Whale fan.
You talked about Karloff, and of course, we know that Bela Lugosi was offered the part, and I think cast as the part. I think he shot some of the movie, or at least did some tests, but his portrayal was seen as too sympathetic for what they wanted.
He said, I'm a star in Hungary, and I will not be a scarecrow here in the United States.
Which is an understandable thing to say, and an understandable take, but it makes you appreciate what a good actor Boris Karloff is, right? Because, huge. Okay, maybe he grunted, but that is a performance.
Times 100, he was just brilliant. But the thing about, this is a pre-code movie.
Yeah.
And it had things in it that had to be cut out.
Even though it was a pre-code movie, right?
One of the sequences, the most famous sequence, is the little girl being thrown into Malibu Lake. That's where they shot the sequence. And she was picked up by Karloff and tossed in, and they had to cut it before he threw her.
And he's playing with her.
Yeah, he doesn't know any better.
He threw the flowers in the lake, so he picks up the girl.
Picks her up, throws her in.
Yeah.
The other thing is a line that Colin Clive says.
In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God.
Had to go.
All of that, thankfully, was restored later.
Yes,
and of course, it'll be in the version that you're about to see. So let's watch it now, and then we'll come back afterwards, talk some more. John Carpenter, you're the best. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Here's the film from Universal in 1931. This is James Whale's Frankenstein. I'm back with John Carpenter, one of the great filmmakers of his generation. And so Frankenstein profoundly influenced you, certainly in Halloween, but I imagine other films as well.
Everything I've done, James Whale, the director of Frankenstein, has influenced me. But the movie itself, just the way it was done, is just brilliant.
I'm anxious to get to Curse of Frankenstein because I want to compare it to Frankenstein. But one of the differences is Colin Clive, as Henry Frankenstein here, is redeemed, right? He recognizes what a terrible thing he's done, whereas Curse of Frankenstein,
No.
he leans in, which I love. Do you have no issue with the redemption of Henry Frankenstein here?
No, I have no issue, but I also recognize the time in which this was made. You couldn't do what Curse of Frankenstein does. You couldn't do that with the main character. You could not do it.
The quarter century of time that lapsed, big difference.
Yeah. People matured, and the audiences matured, and he had to be saved because his bride had to be saved, and everybody had to live happily.
Right. Mae Clark as Elizabeth here in a role originally set to go to Bette Davis.
Yeah. Which I can't understand at all.
Well, you see how good Whale was at casting, too. I mean, I ask this of almost every director I sit with. Casting and your work with actors, most important part of your job, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
That's what you do. You have to be, as a director, you have to be there for the actors to guide them to their performance. That's all the directing is. To guide them to the best performance they can give. And when you choose somebody for a role, that's essential. That's where it all happens, right there. Your choice, that choice.
Bette Davis, Whale thought, was too fierce, too strong to play a helpless victim.
She would totally unbalance the movie. A star in that role, like Joan Crawford or Bette Davis or somebody like that.
Even though she wasn't yet a big star, but he saw it.
Completely unbalanced this movie. You needed somebody who's kind of could fade away into a scene and be there. The acting, the style is so different.
It also informs how unbelievably spectacular Karloff's performance is and how it's leaps and bounds different and ahead of everybody else in the movie.
It's unbelievable. A superlative performance. He was the movie, and the makeup that he had to go through. And
Jack Pierce, great makeup artist, 5 hours every day.
Bolts, can you imagine that?
And then that scene where he carries Dr. Frankenstein's body up the hill, which shot take after take after take. There's no stuntman there. That is Boris Karloff.
That's correct.
Carrying Colin Clive each time, and Karloff, back problems, hospitalized afterwards. A great double feature would be to see Boris Karloff in Frankenstein, and then to see Karloff in Peter Bogdanovich's first film,
Targets?
Yeah, which is a really great film and a great first film.
Yeah.
And it really showcases what a gifted actor Karloff was in any kind of role. John Carpenter, great stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't go away. John and I will return with a remake of Frankenstein, cleverly done more than 25 years later by Hammer Films in Great Britain. The Curse of Frankenstein is next on TCM. Back with filmmaker John Carpenter. John, thanks for being here. Thanks for bringing these two movies that you've picked tonight to us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So for those of you who may not know John Carpenter, I try to avoid hyperbole. But this is arguably the most influential horror director of all time. That argument could certainly be made, and I know there are a lot of filmmakers today who would make it. You've made some good films, John.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
We just saw Frankenstein from 1931, James Whale's film. You talked about the influence that Whale and Frankenstein had on the films that you made. The movie we have now is The Curse of Frankenstein. It's just a reimagination of Mary Shelley's story, made in the late 50s, 1957, by Hammer Films. This also influenced your work as a filmmaker, because this is a totally inventive way to redo this story.
I was 9 years old, I saw this, and this was for my generation then. I had never seen anything like this. Curse of Frankenstein was all British actors and Terence Fisher directing.
One of the great horror directors of his time.
Jack Asher shooting it in color.
The fact that this was in color was a big deal. Tell me why.
Well, it wasn't just the viscera, the blood, but it was everything about the mood of the story. And Frankenstein's face was, was raw flesh, which it would have been.
Yeah, you'll see Christopher Lee as the monster here, or they call it the creature here. Considering that the image of Frankenstein is indelible, it is a word I try not to use. It is iconic, right?
Yes.
And clearly they were like, well, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna do that.
Let's do something different.
This is the Hammer film that launched Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee as horror stars.
Superstars, yeah. Christopher Lee really wanted to do this Boris Karloff role. And he lived in the same apartment that Boris Karloff had in London when he did it. And it was shot in and around Hammer's main studio, Bray Castle. So they go out in the moors and shoot a couple scenes. And the feeling was unbelievable. It was unlike the Universal version, which is Hollywoodized. This had a reality to it. That's what stunned me so much.
So why do you say there's more reality here than in the 1931 film?
Well, in The Curse of Frankenstein, they go through the steps that Frankenstein takes to create a monster. He cuts down this man they've just hung.
What I like is they hadn't just hung him. They even say they hung him 3 or 4 days ago.
That's right. He's a little raw.
He's a little raw, yeah.
And they have to get eyes, then they have to get a brain.
So the process of getting
Yes.
these parts, this turns into a procedural.
That's right. How to make a monster.
Well, the birds didn't waste much time, did they? The eyes. Half the head's eaten away.
They did something unique. They had him in almost like an aquarium, the creature. Mm-hmm. It was all bandaged up. You didn't know what was going to come out. And he was floating in there.
Regarding the reality, because I've heard people say this about you, your films, that you think it's critical when you're going to have something so dramatic, fantastical, a person you can't believe exists who's a threat, a menace to everybody else, or an unknown threat to everybody else, that you're going to give people a heavy dose of reality first to make them believe what? The characters, the story?
Well, it depends on the story, though. In Halloween, this guy had a big old knife. Well, I know what a knife does. I don't need to show you. I want to show him because he's partially human, partially supernatural. We don't want to know Michael Myers too well. We want to keep him a stranger to us. In The Thing, this is a creature that imitates everything it's ever been around. So by God, we're going to bring it out in the light and show you. The cliche is you never show the devil. If I can really get a shot of the devil, I'm telling you, I'm going to put it up there and show you. It's going to scare you.
All right, John, time to see the movie.
I'm ready.
Here it is. From Hammer Films in 1957, directed by Terence Fisher, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, The Curse of Frankenstein. So they made a sequel with Peter Cushing, which, given the end, should tell you that that someone else had their head taken off there at the guillotine.
That's correct.
Yeah.
They sewed it back on.
They sewed it back on. But forget the sequel. You just take the 82 minutes of this film. So different than the first one. And really the main thing, I mean, color, blood, but mostly he's a murderer.
Big time. He's an evil character.
He's an evil character. You don't want him to be, right?
But he is, and he gets his comeuppance in the end of the movie, as we just saw.
Right, but you keep thinking, because you know the first one, which again is a nice little trick that they play, that they know everybody in the audience expects a moment of, what am I doing? What have I done?
Yeah.
But there's no, what have I done?
No.
Which makes this
It nails you. It nails you to the back of the theater, especially when you're 9 years old. I got to tell you, it's big.
You saw it in the theater at 9.
I did. And I could not keep my eyes off the screen.
Yeah, you were struck by it.
Oh, big.
So it's one of those movie-going experiences that
I'll never forget it.
Yeah. Well, let me throw this out. What else? Give me another one. Give me another couple movies that just that floored you.
The Thing from Another World was jaw-dropping. What really nailed me was a movie called The Fly with Vincent Price. And it's a teleportation-type movie.
You saw that in the theater, too?
I did.
Yeah. If you hadn't been beaten to it, would you have remade that movie? Is that a movie you would have been interested in doing again?
Sure.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have done it like Cronenberg. You know, he intellectualized it. I just love the big head of the big fly head.
You would have had.
Because that was popcorn flying.
Right.
I didn't expect to see that. Whoa! It went up in the air.
Have you had those moments for movies? You must have. For movies that aren't horror films? Like you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. My life was the movies, you know. I was like the original Frankenstein monster. I was different. I grew up in a small southern town, and my parents were Yankees.
So
what are we doing here? You know? We
don't
don't sound like them. We don't believe what they believe. So where did I find my redemption? Movies. I went to the movies all the time.
And then you came to L.A., what, 1968?
68, I wanted to be a director. and I wanted a career.
You knew you wanted to direct.
That's it.
Did you know you wanted to do everything? I mean, you
No,
you
I
directed.
didn't. I had no idea about that.
And so the writing and the editing and
No, I had to
the
do that
composing.
because nobody else would do it.
I mean, because of the money.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, so if you'd had a lot of money, you'd have hired an editor.
Hell yes, I would. Oh yeah, but you don't have that when you're coming out of student filmmaking, so you have to make do.
John Carpenter. Wow, I can't believe I'm sitting here talking about horror films
You're
with you.
very kind.
This is.
But I think that these two movies stimulate you, and they are both great in their own ways. And I love them both. I got to say, I love them both.
Would you? I know you're going to say yes, but I mean, we got to have you back. You got to do like at least one night of horror for us a year.
I'm ready.
All right.
I am so ready.
The great John Carpenter. Thank you so much
Ben,
for
thank
being
you.
here. Pleasure. John is done for the night, but of course the movies roll on here on TCM, and as always, they are uncut and commercial free, so stick around.